And welcome back to Who Would Win? Today's Who Would Win comes to us from Reptosaurus King, who asked the question, who would win in a fight? The 2005 incarnation of King Kong versus the Indominus Rex from Jurassic World. Now, this is a little difficult, actually. It's more difficult than I think it lends itself to be, because we've seen Kong take on individuals like the Indominus, Vatanosaurus, something like that, like an evolved version of a T-Rex. I had to basically look up the size parameters for what that dinosaur is, and it is within the size parameters of the Indominus. Indominus was right around the size of the T-Rex at that time, maybe a little bigger, but it was said that it would grow to 50 feet, larger than a T-Rex, and the Vatosaurus, calling it the Vatosaurus, evolved T-Rex, was actually within that same parameter, 40 to 50 feet. So we've seen Kong beat something very similar to the Indominus, particularly one-on-one. And it was even able to take on multiple at once. It struggled, or Kong struggled, don't get me wrong. Those things gave Kong a legitimate fight. But one-on-one, it wasn't so good for the dinosaur. So Kong roughly is about 20 feet tall, 25 feet tall. I couldn't find a weight, but he's definitely a couple tons, easy. Obviously, he's a gorilla. He's very intelligent, got dexterous arms, very powerful, and very flexible. The question here is, if I were to scale the Indominus to the size that assuming that Vatosaurus was, 50 feet, and if we just scale up to a full-grown Indominus, can the Indominus do better than the Vatosaurus? Well, I think it can do better. Whether it can win or not, let's break it down. So we still don't know everything that went into the Indominus. We know that its core, base like DNA core was a T-Rex. We know there was raptor DNA in there. We actually know there's snake DNA in there too. There's several other dinosaurs that don't matter. Cuttlefish that allows it to camouflage. Excuse me. And tree frog that allows it to hide its heat signature. Why, that's not factoring into the fight at all, but just a fun fact. It's also highly intelligent thanks to that raptor gene in there. Capable of being able to problem solve if it needs to. Capable of, analyzing an opponent and really kind of working around its defenses, like it did with the Ankylosaurus. Like it was able to communicate with the raptors. The big thing here is that while the Indoraptor is kind of the 2.0 version of the Indominus, shrunken down, still has all the benefits, none of the real weaknesses. But does it? Because the Indominus is technically engineered for combat. It's not a naturally created thing. It's an artificially created thing that was like the prototype for the Indo, which was designed for combat. And arguably, the Indominus is probably a better model if you really think about it, because the Indominus is much larger. It's more of a, let me put it this way, maybe not a better model, but in terms of like straight combat, no, the Indominus could actually take gunfire with little issue, could take the bite of the T-Rex, raptors, whatever, without really getting its skin heavily damaged, and even survived a couple bites from the mosasaur being dragged under and killed. So the Indominus is actually highly durable. It's got a lot of defensive capabilities, whereas the Indoraptor lacks that actually to a very large degree. Like Blue, a Velociraptor, much smaller than even the T-Rex was compared to the Indo, or the Indominus, was able to beat the Indoraptor because Blue is just that intelligent. And, the Indoraptor, I think, was either skewered or whatever. And yet that's supposed to be the superior model? Like, no, that's not how that shit works. One other fun fact I'd like to just point out about the Indominus is that mouth. That mouth does not open like a traditional dinosaur mouth. Like you see, or at least we see it there. So you see the dinosaur's mouth's kind of like open like that. Or that's the best way to put it in as an angle. Kind of open like roar, like that. Well, the Indominus can go one step and do that. Like I think that's where the snake genes came in, where it's got this huge maw, like just can swallow a person whole if it wants to. It's got a huge mouth. And it's also got very powerful arms with grabbing claws on it. So, if the Indominus were somehow let loose on Skull Island, messing around with the ecosystem, although honestly, Indominus would probably not even be the most dangerous thing if you listed on Skull Island, particularly the most current iteration of Skull Island, that if it were still around. And they came across this version of Kong. Who would come out on top? Well, they would charge just like what happens in the movie. Kong would probably be beaten on the Indominus, but the Indominus is genetically designed to be physically tough. Like it's a literal weapon that is designed to beat on things and rip things apart. So it probably would not take as much damage, or probably wouldn't be as hurt as the Vatosaurus was. They would struggle, and here's where a big difference comes in, and it's two reasons for that. That what Kong basically tried to do with the Vatosaurus was, and ultimately succeeded, was break its jaw and crush it in its skull. First off, the Indominus' jaws can open far greater than the Vatosaurus could. So that's going to take Kong even longer to do. But second, and more importantly, the Indominus actually can stop Kong from doing that because it actually has arms and claws where it can actually grab on and dig in and just kind of, grab Kong and kind of yank him away for, coming in either biting or slamming with its tail. So the traditional method that Kong would use to kill a dinosaur like this, or an enemy like this, doesn't work on the Indominus, who's already probably more intelligent than the Brontosaurus is. And it has physical differences that make that don't make it an impossible strategy, but make it a very difficult strategy to work. So Kong probably either gets clawed and maybe bitten, but then just yanks the Indominus right off his ass. Actually, I need to get a height for the Indominus real quick, because we know Kong's height. Indominus Rex. Let's see here. How big was the Indominus Rex ultimately? We know how big lengthwise it was going to be, but height was 5.5 meters. It's 18 feet tall. It's actually shorter than Kong by a good 7 feet. In terms of the weight, though, I mean, this thing weighed what? Do we got a weight? No, the weight was unknown. If it was at least the size of it was 43 feet long, probably weighed in excess of a T-Rex, but that makes it actually smaller normally than like the Brontosauruses that Kong fights. But we are scaling it up to its full size, which is basically Gigantosaurus size, or Gigantosaurus, depending on pronunciation, who's making his debut in Jurassic World Dominion, and I'm actually really looking forward to that. So that probably scales him more up to the size of Gigantosaurus. This one's going to be a bit of a back and forth, because Kong, I think the Indominus is something, at least for this version of Kong, the Indominus is not a creature that Kong is immediately prepared for. He's prepared for the Brontosauruses, who have tiny arms still, big heads, they're very robust and powerful, but he's not prepared for something within that size range that can counter his main method of killing them. Yeah, he can still smash their heads in with, I think he smashed one's head in with with either a rock or a log, if I'm not mistaken. So that avenue is still there. But again, Indominus is actually bred for combat and killing. There's going to be a lot of back and forth. Kong is going to be smacking down. He's trying to basically get on top of the Indominus. Will that be effective? Will he be able to do that against a full-grown Indominus? If it was the young one, like the one we see in the movie, yes, I think he'd be able to do that. The adult, that one's going to be difficult, especially because he also got those spikes on his back. But at the end of the day, my money would still probably go on Kong. I think Kong is still the more intelligent individual from what we can see. Just being an ape gives him that advantage. If this thing had the intelligence of Blue, which we have no evidence to suggest it did, we might be having a different argument, because then it could legitimately strategize. But but Kong, after a while, would probably be trying new tactics. We know Kong, especially we see it in the Skull Islands, will use tools, be it a log, smash Indominus head him, throw a rock at it, hit him in the face, and then maybe come in, and then ultimately probably grab onto it, endure the pain, and either break its neck or eventually get the jaw snap thing down. The jaw snap thing is difficult, though, because of how wide we see that thing's jaw being able to open. Or he does what, or he does a Hail Mary sacrifice play. As, the Indominus comes in, he basically does what Kong does against the Skullcrawler, that big one, and just throws the fist right down the Indominus' throat, and just rips stuff out, and just Indominus goes down. I think this would be a really tough match for Kong, but I think Kong would make it out alive, and I think he'd be the winner. Percentage-wise overall, I should say, I think there's a very solid amount of times the Indominus would actually take this version of Kong down. But if you're asking me who wins more, like 9 times out of 10, or like the majority, the 51%, then yeah, I would go Kong in this fight. Be a great fight to see, though. This would be a cool fight, I think. But that's just my opinion. What do you think? Put in the comments below. Tell them thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.